My name is William Crowton and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our recent battlefield trip to Belgium. Believe me, it was well worth the 11-hour trip to get there by coach. This was a history trip organised for the third-year students who wanted to visit the battlefields and learn more about those who gave their lives in the First World War. I was particularly keen to go on the trip because I had a great-great-great-uncle who shared my inherited name, William Crowton. My family knew he had died in the war and was remembered somewhere in France, but nobody before me had ever visited. I hoped to find his name amongst the many others listed. The trip was an ideal opportunity to search for him. I did a bit of research with my family before we left, and I found that he was remembered at Thiepval Memorial in the Somme, and we found the location for his grave on a special war graves website, so I had a good idea where to start. I learned that he was born on July 23rd, 1892, and he died on the battlefields of France 8 days before his 24th birthday. He was promoted to Lance Corporal after his death. I also like the sound of learning about the weaponry, vehicles and equipment used during the war that helps lead us to victory. None of us really knew what was in store when we left school on a cold Thursday morning at 5:30 a.m. We then arrived in France late afternoon and settled into our hotel, ready for the adventures ahead. The first day took us to Thiepval, where I was excited to get the chance to search for William. We arrived in the morning at an enormous, well-kept memorial site, and the sheer number of lost soldiers' names listed on every wall and pillar was overwhelming. My friend and I followed the map with Mr. Grant, our teacher, and we soon found William Crowton's name listed. I laid a small remembrance cross for him, and it left me feeling quite sad. Before we left the memorial, I got the chance to read a short passage aloud as the wreath was laid by my classmates. The passage read, "They shall not grow old as we who are left grow old. They shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. After going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them." I was glad I got to read that. In the afternoon, we visited examples of the British trenches owned by the Canadian government. It was interesting to see how little ground was covered in such a vast amount of time. On the second day, we visited the Meningate Memorial and the Tyne Plot Cemetery. We returned to the Meningate in the evening to attend a moving last post ceremony, where 2 other members of my year laid a wreath as we watched the procession. Amazingly, this ceremony is held at 8 p.m. on every day of the year. It felt like the soldiers lost at war were well remembered. I will certainly remember the trip for the rest of my life, and I think it is important for as many future pupils as possible to get the same opportunity. Thank you.
As the granddaughter, great-granddaughter and great-great-granddaughter of war veterans, Remembrance gave an important day for myself and my family. It is a day of reflection for those lives lost, as well as a day of thanks to those who returned home safely and the freedom these battles are giving us today. Many of my relatives came home to their families, and both them and their lives were very familiar to me. However, I recently learned of an uncle who did not survive the First World War, Sergeant Richard Jonathan Warbank, was a member of the King's Own Royal Lancaster Regiment and died in battle on the 4th of May 1915. I feel extremely privileged to have been given this opportunity to visit his flat at the Meningate a few weeks ago. This visit and seeing his name engraved in stone at such a poignant location made me feel very emotional. I also felt an immense sense of pride for him on my great-great-grandfathers, Thomas McGilvery of the Black Watch and William George Nightingale of the Guards. At the start of World War II meant that my great-grandfather, George McGilvery, then joined the Black Watch to fight along with my great-grandmother, Lillian Rose Nightingale, who joined the ATF. Most notably, though, is my granddad, a true war hero, having fought in various conflicts from 1972 to 2006, including the Falklands, Northern Ireland, Bosnia and Iraq. Major Kevin William Burrows of Royal Engineers. Thank you to all these heroes and many other men and women who have been courageous and made sacrifices to give us the freedom we enjoy today.
Hello, my name is Merryweather and I'm in 3rd year. All of the people who were going on this trip were really excited to go and travel to France and Belgium. Personally, at first, I was mainly looking forward to the thrill of it all, the first trip abroad without my parents. And although it was a 12-hour bus journey there, I have no regrets about going on this trip, but not because of the thrill. Learning about the war strategies and battles and hearing about the millions of soldiers who risked their lives for the country in a classroom was one thing, but when you visit the thousands of graves in many cemeteries, seeing individual names and seeing them all around you is quite another. You would read a name and all of a sudden it wouldn't be a gravestone. It would be a sign of a whole life. Each of these people had a life, and it may sound silly, but on a normal day, I don't really think about the fact that everything I do or feel or think is part of my life. A life is a huge sacrifice. I don't know about you, but that just got me to understand how much these men risked. Being somewhere can convey far more information than you can learn in a classroom. Of course, not feeling what they felt, but picturing where they were or how they lived. We explored beautiful towns you would never guess were once in the middle of a terrible war. We went to this large crater that was caused by a mine exploding. Again, although we knew these things happened, we didn't account for the pure scale of them. At every cemetery or memorial, I would look around to try and find my surname, like most of the others. I only found one, but that was enough. We got to lay a little cross with a puppy on it next to any grave and memorial, and I put mine next to a gravestone that did not hold an identity. For I feel that even though they may not be known now, they should not be forgotten. As we all know, there will always be disagreements, battles, wars all around the world, but these men should never be forgotten or overlooked. Overall, I couldn't have imagined this trip being any better, nor could I have gotten any more from it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Giulia Burns and I'm in third year. The battlefield trip was a very memorable experience that really put things into perspective for me. When you're in a history lesson, learning about the casualties and what life was like in the trenches, you can never fully imagine the enormity of the war. But when you step out onto the battlefields, see the mass graves and all of the thousands of names on the many gates, you can't help but feel mournful for the men who lost their lives. Each day of the trip, we visited countless graves, all the same colour and all the same size. It may sound repetitive and boring, but it was far from it. Because when you realise that you are standing where a man died and fought for his life, it becomes real. One thing that stood out with the graves was no name and just the inscription, a soldier known only to God. And I could not help but think of their families, never being able to say goodbye and know where their sons, grandsons, brothers or cousins lie, and if they have ever been found. I feel incredibly honoured to have had the opportunity to lay the wreath at the Menin Gate, to remember and pay respect to all the Old Stopfordians who died. Being part of such an important ceremony that has occurred every night since 1928 as a tribute to those brave fallen soldiers was for me not only a very moving experience, but also a great privilege. It is a moment I will remember and treasure for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Time to stop, time to think, time to honour. I am Thomas Stanton in the third year of Stockport Grammar, and of all the wonderful experiences I have had over my time at Stockport Grammar School, being chosen to lay the Remembrance wreath will remain etched in my memory. Remembrance honours those who served to defend our freedom, the freedom and way of life I now take for granted. Yet, as we stood in silence and laid the wreath, the world stood still. We all united across faiths, cultures and backgrounds to remember those who gave up their lives to save ours. Looking through the cemeteries during the battlefield strip, there were rows of graves, rows of people who chose to be heroes and stand up for what is right. The battlefield strip was a mix of fun, culture and a deeper understanding, and a milestone in my Stockport Grammar's journey to date. It is now time for us all to stop, think and listen. Thank you.